Hello, Internet. How you doing? I figured to do a nice little surprise Q&A because, well, I got nothing else to do right now. Can everybody hear me all right? Can somebody just put it down there if you can hear me? Because that's a big worry that I have doing live ones. So anyways, hi, everybody. I figure we could just do some Q&A, chat about whatever. I'm doing this in my office today. Normally I do this all in my game room, but since I actually have set up in my office to start doing some games online with my friends now that we're all locked away, I figured might as well just keep the setup going on in here. But let's see, loud and clear. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. It's always the fear doing live of like, am I just talking to myself and everybody's watching my lips waggle? Well, let's go ahead and answer any questions that you have. Hey, Seth, what's it like being a cosmic deity living among mortal men? I think my wife would disagree with that assessment. So I don't know. I guess it's just like being an average weirdo with a camera. Oh yes, my shirt. Kind of in honor of the Roll20 or the what am I doing? The Traveler character creation video that I just did. Armor Class 10 heard that I did a shout out to their shirt on their video. So if, by the way, I haven't done any official announcement yet, but if anyone goes to Armor Class 10 and orders any shirt and they type in the name Skorkowski, spelled like mine, they'll get a 10% discount, and that's like a permanent thing. So I was going to post that somewhere later on, but in case anybody wants one of these shirts or any of the others, 10% discount if you use my name. Anyway, let's see what we got here. Gonna try to keep for Call of Cthulhu. I've never GM'd before. Any tips? The biggest tips I ever have when it comes to game mastering is have fun. Don't get so stuck in the rules or what the game is supposed to be in your mind that it kind of gets in the way of you and your players having fun. You just, if you come to a what the rules are, most of the time you can just kind of do a judgment call and move forward and just keep the game moving. Nothing sucks the fun out of a game faster than having to stop every few minutes and double check the rules. So once you kind of feel that you're a little confident in them, do it, make a judgment call, and keep going and just have fun. Later on, you can go back and learn if you're doing everything right or not. But once the game goes live, just roll with it and have fun. What tabletop streaming service, if any, do you use or recommend? From Ronin7997. Man, this thing's like flipping up so fast. I'm like trying to read it as it's going. Right now, we started using Roll20 for their tabletop thing, but their audio and video is just absolutely god awful. So we're using Winamp, I think is the name, for the video and chat between us, and then we're using Roll20 for the actual tabletop. I am extremely new to online gaming or running a game online because a lot of people have been asking, what do I suggest or any tips that I have? And it's like, guys, I'm as green as you. So I defer to the experts on this one because any advice that I have is as a complete noob. It's not going to help you. You probably know more than me on this subject. The biggest tip that I've been able to learn, and this is from doing streams with like the How We Roll podcast group, because we're doing Massive Nyarlathotep and I'm just a player there, is schedule a break every single hour, like on the hour if you can. Of course, you might have to like do a little before, a little after, depending on what's going on in the game. And the reason for that is unlike when we're all sitting around a table and somebody needs to like go to the kitchen and grab something to eat or something like that, they can like tuck away from the table, grab a sandwich and come back, and they can kind of hear what's going on in the other room, and they can still be involved for that like couple seconds that they're gone. But when you're tethered to your computer, it's not that easy. So we try to schedule a regular break just so people can get up, stretch their legs, do whatnot, because that's a real small thing that you don't think about when you're just sitting around a table. But when you are tethered to the computer, it makes a huge difference. So that's the only decent advice I think I could possibly give you on that subject. Jeff Glasser, thank you for the $5. Guys don't need to feel like you need to pay anything, but anyways, how's it going? It's going really well. I'm locked in my house, like probably many of you are, but other than that, it's going fine. Since I already worked from home, it's not going to be too different for me. Though my wife is here now during the day, since I was already pretty much a homebody all the time, just working on whatever it is I'm working on. So the biggest difference that I've had to endure is the fact that I get to go out even less. But compared to most people, I didn't go out that much. Asa Skwarkowski, you wrote some books, right? It's gone. You wrote some books, right? Any advice on how to write a book? Not about the content, but how to convey this content to make it interesting. When you're writing a story, because I do fantasy and kind of either medievalish fantasy with my Black Raven series or my urban fantasy, which hold on, such as Ashes of Onyx. Anyway, the biggest thing that you want to keep in mind is no matter how much world building and cool technology or magic or background that you do, ultimately it comes down to the characters. So you will still want to make it a character-driven story, and all of that brilliant, amazing world building needs to still be second to the characters that populate it. A lot of speculative fiction authors, when they're first starting off, kind of forget that part. We get so into like building our own world that it's kind of like, well, now I just need to make a story to show off my world. And what you end up with is a story that people don't care as much about the characters. So focus on the characters being the central part of the story and the world being the background or what they're interacting with, but don't make the world the big focus. That's kind of the big kind of beginner tip when writing fantasy or anything like that. After that, just make a schedule and stick to it. When I first started writing, I did a rule that I had to do a chapter a month, and it didn't specify how long of a chapter it was, but I had to start and finish a chapter in the same month. So at the end of the month, I might kind of start getting a little nervous, and I might have to kind of move plans around in order to do it. So you stick a very strict deadline. A lot of people get into writing, and the first time work gets busy or life starts happening, they kind of stop writing and they'll say, I'll get back to it when it's done. And then they never get back to it. So set a very reasonable, very low deadline to yourself. Make it something low. That way, if you have a busy month, you can still meet it, and stick to it rigidly. That's pretty much the only solid advice I can give, where a lot of people start writing, they'll join a writing group that I'm in or something, and then I end up never seeing them again because life got in the way and they just never got back into it. Let's see. Philip, speaking of books, really enjoyed Ashes. Think we'll see more of that cast setting at some point. I don't know. I have it open to where we could do a sequel, but I also wrote it as a standalone. A lot of it depends just how well it's received overall. If there's enough of a demand for it, I do have a couple ideas that I want to explore. But also, Ashes took me about 11 months to write, and then the whole getting an agent, selling it to a publisher doing their part to it, et cetera, that was another 2 years. So even if since I don't have to worry about getting an agent or hopefully selling it to a publisher this time, hopefully City Owl will take me again for a sequel, that'd be, let's say, 11 months to write it, and then another 8-9 months between once I have a final draft and then before it comes out. One really great quote when it comes to writing, as somebody said, is being an author is a lot like telling a joke and waiting 2 years to find out if it's funny. So probably not going to do a sequel for it unless I see that there's an actual audience for it. I'm happy with the way Ashes ended. I don't want to kind of keep going with it and end up rehashing the same plot, because I would rather just end it on a really good note than find myself kind of recycling the same plot again, because that's boring. It's boring to read. It's boring to write. Okay. Let's see. Have you looked into the system Burning Wheel from Andrew Buer? I have not. Sorry. Hold on. Stop scrolling. Hey, Seth, I need some monster advice. I'm running the Lost Mine of Flufflevitic, and I have an arachnophobic player. What would you choose to replace the giant spiders with? Okay, so the actual player is arachnophobic. Okay. Man, depending on it, I might still go with the spiders, but I'm also an SOB at times. As long as I'm not like throwing a rubber spider at them or a live spider at them at the table. I'm not familiar with that scenario, so I don't know what else would be fitting with it. But if there's a giant spider in it, you might want to just do some other type of insect. If they're really that arachnophobic that they'd have to check out if you threw in a giant spider, probably just throw in some sort of insect or anything like that. But sorry, I'm just not familiar enough with that scenario to tell you anything about it. Favorite D&D campaign setting, and what are your favorite areas in the setting? From Adam Pinder. Oh man, I've always going to have a soft spot for it started with the first edition, the Fritz Lieber's Lankmar setting. That was monumentally impactful on me. I had this great cover. It had Fawford and the Great Mauser kind of like in an alley looking over their shoulder, and you could see up the streets of Lankmar. And I got that book and I devoured it. Had this great map of the city and these little geomorphs, because the idea was the city is a living thing, so it changes. So you could actually change the map with all these little geomorphs, and you could flip them other ways, and that was cool. So that is what ended up eventually getting my love of Fritz Lieber and starting the Black Raven series. But that was definitely my favorite D&D setting that I ever ran. I'd occasionally enjoy reading like some of the Dragonlance modules and stuff, but those never just called to me the way Lankmar did. Let's see. How do you feel about DCC Lankmar? Haven't read it. Just haven't looked at it. I know it's out there. A lot of people, when I mentioned that I love Lankmar, have pointed it out, but I just haven't picked it up. Would you consider making a video / series on AD&D First Edition and how to make / play a character? Probably not. I think, like with a lot of things, I think D&D in any edition is pretty well covered. But that just doesn't really sound that appealing to me. I do a lot of reviews and stuff for First Edition because that's what I played pretty much for the majority of my gaming career. We started with First Edition because that's what our GM had. Second edition had just come out, and our GM was like, yeah, I'm not getting new books. You guys better go to used bookstores or something to get some first edition, because I've got all the first edition books. So we started playing first edition 91, and second edition had come out, I think, in 89. So that's why I'm so familiar with first edition. And then we did the end of a first edition, second edition hybrid for years. But that's the main reason I talk about it, is I have the most experience with that one and I'm the most familiar with it. Let's see. Tom Collins, $5. Thank you very much. Once again, guys, don't need to do that. Are there any suggestions you might have for a DM trying to get into Traveler? My group has only played D&D and dabbled in Call of Cthulhu with maintenance and ship rules. It seems complicated. That is Noah Daniel. In all honesty, with Traveler, talking people into any game, the big thing is, first, you've got to sell yourself on the idea as to why you think this game would be fun, why you think they would be a good fit for it, and that's your sales pitch. I think it would be good for us because you guys like this, or we could do this. So any sales pitch that anyone, I guess, online could ever give you as to why you should play a game is never going to be as effective as what sales pitch you can give to your players as to why they should play that game with you, because you know what it is they want. And if you believe that this is going to be a good fit for them, you can sell it. Otherwise, you kind of pick something up and kind of tool around with it for a bit and kind of do it as side games. But when it comes to a lot of the ship maintenance and the ship costs and all those parts of Traveler, that can feel overwhelming. Some of it you can kind of streamline your way through. Like for our group, we don't worry about life support fees. The cost for life support. If you take on so many passengers, your cost for life support goes up because of it. It started becoming like too much paperwork when we were trying to just run a game, and our characters are trying to get from this planet to this planet, and they're going to pick up some passengers, and all of a sudden we've got to stop for 20 minutes to do paperwork. It's like, hey, let's just get rid of that step. We're going to assume the life support cost has already been taken into account on the passenger cost and just kind of breeze through that. Right now, one of my players, George, who kind of showed up at the end of my last live stream to say hi, he is putting together this really cool kind of flow chart for cargo and passengers in order to like kind of quickly get through the roles and basically kind of get through the mechanic part and then get back to the game as fast as possible, which eventually on this series, I'll get to that, but I don't know how long it'll be before I do. But a lot of it, you can just kind of hand wave through it. Like in any game, such as Dungeons and Dragons, you've got a lot of overland, you're going from this town to this town. We could role play out the entire journey and do a full session or two, getting from this town to this town where the adventure is going to be. Or we can just kind of hand wave it and go, okay, after a few weeks, you arrive in this town, let's get on with the adventure. So you can kind of move past a lot of stuff if you just want to get on to another part of the game. You never need to feel obligated to go through a portion that you guys don't find fun and interesting. If you have to go through a part that you find unfun and interesting, you got a problem. Something needs to change. A lot of the times it's just change how you approach it. Not every part of every game works for everybody. So never feel afraid to cut it out. It's meant to be fun. So if a part of it's not fun or a part of it's kind of a drag, skip it. I recommend you try it once. And if you try it and you're like, oh, we got potential in that, we could make that work, then try it till you get it to work. Or if you're like, no, I don't see this as ever being fun, then just delete it, get rid of that and move on to the parts of the game that are fun. Okay. How old was I when I first DM'd? It's seriously, the first time I tried, I was 13, but we're not going to talk about that. 14, I was probably when I first actually took a group together and I ran some games. I'm not going to say those games were good, but we definitely had fun. But I ran it like a 14-year-old does, which was kind of, I was basically trying to emulate what my game master did, not as well. And it took a while before I kind of found my own voice and my own style, but I started really doing it when I was 14 years old. Okay. Let's see. Did you ever run Herring for Call of Cthulhu? They involve non-mythos entities, ghosts, werewolves, or just spooky supernatural. How did your players respond? And that's from AJ Rabies. Well, yes. I originally, before I actually officially played Call of Cthulhu, we did a kind of a homegrown system. We used the Cyberpunk 2020 rule set, and then I house ruled it, made a ton of changes, and we kind of applied it to the Call of Cthulhu setting. And the reason I did that was because whenever I would talk to people about Call of Cthulhu, they would always tell me it always has to be mythos, and you can never play it without mythos, and you should always go insane or die. And I thought that sounds just terribly boring. But also because I was extremely versed in the Cyberpunk interlock mechanic, and I didn't want to learn a new system. And with that one, the very first adventure that I wrote was a ghost story about a cop that had been killed by some mobsters, and now the ghost was coming back, and it was titled Revenant, kind of like the DiCaprio movie. And I am happy to say that adventure will be becoming available at some point in the future pretty soon, but I can't give any more information about that. But I have done several adventures that do not have any mythos in it. There are a few published ones that don't have any mythos in it. The Rescue, which is from 1983, was a werewolf story. There's no mythos. And one that I love, absolutely love, is called the Westchester House, and it takes place in the Winchester Mystery Mansion that's out in California. And that's one where you're in this crazy mansion and all this stuff is going on, and no mythos whatsoever. In fact, spoiler, there's no supernatural at all. It's very Scooby-Doo-esque. So yes, I prefer doing those where you can kind of mix it up periodically. Stygian Fox, I never joined in on this Kickstarter, so I don't know if it came out yet. Did one where it was like, there were like 5 scenarios in this adventure, and every single one of them, it ends up that there's no supernatural element at all. It's just everything points like it is. And the idea is that a game master would kind of sprinkle these in during a normal campaign, and because the players, the biggest problem with Call of Cthulhu is that you're playing Call of Cthulhu, so you're always going to assume it's the supernatural or the mythos or something like that. So you use that against them to where they're going to kind of follow the idea that, oh, it's obviously the mythos and supernatural, but really it's, Farmer Johnson wearing a rubber mask or whatever. So I think that's kind of a cool way to mix it up and use the fact that, they can't help but metagame with the fact that they know they're playing Call of Cthulhu against them. And now it's like, surprise, it's really nothing supernatural at all. So yeah, I'm all for it. Let's see. What else we got? Were there any sources of inspiration that allowed you to become a better GM horror, or did it simply click with your personal taste? A lot of it clicked with my personal taste. I have always enjoyed the darker sides of fantasy. That's just going back. That's just what I've always preferred. I mean, like we were talking about Fritz Lieber earlier, who the older fantasy where there wasn't a horror genre. It was just weird fiction, usually pulled in a lot of horror. That clicked with me very well. That is a very different style that you kind of slowly figure out how to approach. One of the best things that helped me was actually playing with Scott Dorward from Master Nyarlathotep. I've been GMing Call of Cthulhu for years. I've been making videos about it, but Scott has such a good way of kind of making it really creepy and stuff. So horrifically complimentary of his style and being able to convey that mood. And he can switch it on like without any effort, just boom, all of a sudden we're kind of laughing and joking, and he can ramp it up right into the mood instantly. It's just kind of incredible. So that's actually helped me quite a bit, because afterwards I'm like, I need to try what Scott did. But it's like with any sort of game mastering, it's kind of a thing you just have to kind of practice and learn. Let's see. AB Coates, 10 pounds. Hey, Seth, thanks for putting Conan 2D20 on my radar. How often do you use modules versus using bits and pieces of modules, making an adventure whole cloth? Right now, I use more modules than not. With the past couple sessions of Traveler, we haven't used a module at all. We're just kind of going and doing our own thing. In my D&D heydays, I never ran modules. I ran like one every year or two, but then I would dissect tons of other modules and just pull in cool little traps or rooms or puzzles and do that. So I guess over my entire game mastering career, I've used modules like 40% of the time. But over the past couple of years, especially now that I'm doing a lot of reviews, I do modules 90% of the time. So there was a large period in there, it was like 0. So, anyways. What have we got? Scott Dorward is an absolute wizard and a great inspiration. Yeah, he is. He's a really nice guy. Favorite horror movie? Where are you going? Well, I didn't see the second half of it before it scrolled away. Here it is. From Pyro Volpine, favorite horror movie, any films that you pull inspiration from? Man, I'm going to say my favorite horror movie is probably The Thing, the original John Carpenter The Thing. Not The Thing from the Other World, but The Thing. That one is just about perfect. It holds up very well. Ones that I've pulled inspiration from quite a bit. When I talked about Call of Cthulhu early on, one of the films that really gets me in the mood for Call of Cthulhu is The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp. That is pretty much a Call of Cthulhu movie. It just doesn't have tentacles in it. But everything else about it is just perfect Call of Cthulhu. It really kind of gets me in that frame of mind as far as what an adventure like that should be. Let's see. Have I ever killed a player, not a character, but a player? Nope. They're all alive. Let's see. You missed some super chats. Did I? I don't know. I get to talking for a while. And okay. Let's see. Deadman Seltzer. Ever played any games by Palladium Books, Heroes Unlimited? I have not. In all honesty, if I have not reviewed a type of game, chances are I either haven't played it or I haven't played it enough to really warrant a full opinion of it. So, because a lot of people ask, like, have you played this or you played that? It's like, probably not. There's so many games out there. What have we got? Have ever run Beyond the Mountains of Madness? Man, Mountains of Madness is it's one that I would like. I enjoy the story. In fact, I just the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society released their audio version for free like a week or two ago, and I just listened to that. I've listened to the BBC Radio 4 performance of it several times, and I love that one. They also edited it down a bit, because Lovecraft goes off on like just incredible amounts of detail. But I really enjoy that story. I thought about running that adventure a couple years ago, and one of my players I know just would not like it. I'm not confident that he would like it, so I just not going to run it. So I figure there's enough adventures out there that I can do that I can feel that everybody would enjoy. But as long as I'm playing with him, probably not going to run a giant campaign like that I don't see him liking that much. But see, Call of Cthulhu in an Old West setting would be fun. Actually, I did my very first game of that at Total Con, and that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I hadn't picked it up, but I want to do the Gaslight once Call of Cthulhu by Gaslight for 7th edition is re-released. But the Western setting they have ended up being a lot more fun than I was expecting it to be. I like the fact that it's got a lot of pulp in it. So it's Wild West is more like the movies, where you pull out the 2.6 guns and you jump off a cliff onto the back of a horse and you ride, versus that gritty realism of the Wild West, which didn't really appeal to me at first. So I kind of like they're kind of doing a Hollywood mythos horror. So I think that's kind of cool. Not sure if it's been asked, but have you ever played Jack the NPC as a player character, or is he just for the videos? That was Greg Pine. Jack the NPC is based off of a real NPC that I did, whose name was Jack. It was he had his last name was different than what I used in Call of Cthulhu, only because I had forgotten at the time. Monroe. It was Jack Monroe, and I used him for The Haunting. And he stuck around for 2 or 3 adventures, and then he kind of just drifted off to do his own thing. And he came back again a couple times. I think the Star on the Shore, when I ran that, was probably the last time I actually used Jack as an NPC in the game. But primarily the Jack in the game versus the Jack in the videos are entirely different, because the real Jack or the real NPC is this just loser, and he was kind of meant to help direct the players and kind of ease them into the way of doing an investigative game, because we had come from very combat focused games. So he would kind of say like, hey, maybe we should research this, or that sort of thing. But he didn't need to serve that purpose for very long, so I just kind of had him wander off. So yes, it was based off of a real character. How he came about in the videos is I was doing a video for The Haunting. This is when my channel first started off, and I decided to throw on a fedora and a suit and get in front of a green screen and do it. And I had such a kick doing it that I decided to start bringing him back in later videos. And it was a couple months before I decided that he's just going to be in all of my review videos. So he would like popped up in like one or two, and then I'd skip it, and then he'd come up again. And finally I'm like, nope, it's just a lot more fun to like cut to kind of a sidekick character. So the Video Jack is really, really kind of a product of the videos. Let's see. So, Space Pirate Bazasso, you've gone into a few details before regarding a new RPG group and bringing new players into an existing group. Any tips for starting a new RPG group / getting players together? Not really. Years ago, how I started my group when I had first gone off to college, and this was way back in the 90s. I made personal ads that I actually put up around the dorms at campus. That was like, lonely game masters seeking 5 to 6 players to enjoy long evenings with, et cetera, et cetera. And one of those players, well, 2 of those players I'm still playing with. The other one, one of them is my best friend, and the other I married. But that's how I did it. But I haven't gone from no one to play with to a full group since then. After then, it's been, somebody leaves because, life happens and they have to move away, or et cetera, et cetera. And there's kind of enough people in our social group that know we have a group and we can invite them in. So if you're looking at like just get a group together from nothing, I'm not going to be able to give you the best tips on that. There actually are a few websites that can help you with that, or if you go onto a lot of the different groups out there like Reddit or Facebook, and a lot of those, you can often find people popping up saying like, hey, is there anyone in this area that's looking to play a game? But it's one of the things is once you end up with the game, you suddenly don't have a shortage of people wanting to play with you. But once you're trying to get a game and you have no one to play with, it's like impossible to find somebody to play with you. It's kind of like, when you're dating, like, oh, now that I have somebody, I've got all these other people are interested in me. It's like, where the hell were they before this? So no real advice on that one. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Okay, so hey Seth, love your videos, especially the new Traveler videos. How are you managing your games now during the pandemic? Have you and your group gone digital? Yes, what is your platform? Well, I answered this before. We're doing Roll20 right now, and for the video portion, because Roll20 is kind of suck when it comes to video, we're doing a WinApp for it. So, and that's just because some of the players, since they have to do so many video conferences right now for their jobs, they're really familiar with it. So that's what we're doing. I don't have any like loyalty to it. I've thought about picking up Fantasy Grounds and just kind of giving that a spin to see if it does anything differently or better, or, easier. But I figured, I've already got Roll20 set up. I've already got our little icons made and all that jazz. So I figure I'll just stick with that, and hopefully once the pandemic and everything is over, we can get back to sitting around a table and chatting. So tomorrow I am running a game. We're doing the Traveler Adventure, The Ship in the Lake, and we'll see how that one goes. I've got my, because this is where I'll be sitting, I've got my my GM binder of doom that's got all of my Traveler stuff in it that I'll be hopefully flipping through furiously tomorrow as my players ask me some weird question that I am completely unprepared for and I should have already known the answer to. Man, I said you think you do more sketches like Picard versus Kirk style in the future. Maybe it depends. With the Kirk versus Picard, that was born from a kind of fun little debate that we had my wife and I kind of chatted about. And we put together over a long period of time, and it was all born from uh, I ended up meeting this friend. It was a friend of mine's girlfriend who was very serious about the Kirk versus Picard debate, and I had never encountered anyone that was truly serious about it. And I of course, is just kind of saying like, well, Kirk is better because of he rip his shirt off and punch any problem in the face. And she ended up started getting like personally angry with me, and so I decided, next time I see her, I'm gonna give a real reason why. So I ended up watching uh, all of Star Trek to win a debate in the future, and it was pretty easy. We came across this one episode where they're in the same situation, and it kind of born from that. So as far as whipping together another kind of sketch of everybody sitting around the table, I at least want to have a good topic they can talk about, and I like the fact that it's also then with a player doing something very clever in game, So that was a video I'd like to recreate, but who knows how long it'll be before I can kind of pull off that trick again, because I don't want to just make it for the pure novelty of it. I would at least want to make it where it's a good video to laugh and watch, and it's got some layers, kind of like that one did, because you can watch it and watch the debate, or you can watch the Todd character suddenly bust out this absolutely brilliant move, which I didn't come up with that move, by the way. One of my players did, and he's the same player that I later referred to as Todd when I did the Story of Jeff video. And so he told me about they did this in their game one day with Jeff, and I always thought that was such a brilliant and creative use of magic. I figured I'll go ahead and throw that in there. And he contacted me after that video. It was like, yeah, and I forget what it was. They had some sort of little goofy name they had for that maneuver, but so I don't know if I could recreate that one as well. If I thought about doing a critical role style traveler campaign, imagine I have a decent audience. Not really. I have no interest in streaming games. For us, game day is like our day that our friends, we can all get together and we can hang out and we can chat, and this is like our time to just ignore the rest of the world out there. So we don't want to turn that into some sort of spectacle where people are kind of invited into the room with us during our personal time. So, okay. Bill Stevens, $5. Thank you, sir. You missed my super chat. I'm a writer who's owning a skill with education. What advice would you give to new writers? Well, I mentioned this one earlier. One of the big things that I do suggest is give yourself some sort of deadline, and don't make it an extreme deadline. Make it really reasonable. For me, it was a chapter a month, and stick to that rigidly. It doesn't matter how long the chapter was. It just had to be a chapter. So it could be 1,000 words, or it could be 7,000 words. You decide how long your chapter is. And every month, like clockwork, you must finish that chapter. And so some months you will get busy and life blows up and goes crazy. And as long as you can stick to, whatever happens, it's getting near the end of the month, I'm going to lock myself away and I'm going to finish this chapter because this is the deadline that I have set for myself. That is how you really get into the habit of writing. And then as you progress on, you can increase that. But a lot of times I'll talk to people and they'll say the deadline that I'm going to give myself is I'm going to do 20,000 words in a month. And it's like, okay, that's a huge goal. And yes, I can do 20,000 words in a month, but that's probably not attainable every single month, at least 20,000 good words. So that's why I say I set it low, but where it's enough to keep you consistent. Because if you set it too high and you miss it, then you're kind of like, no, okay, then you kind of fall out of it and it becomes a lot easier not to meet that one again. So sorry I missed that, Bill, but that is the biggest advice that I give to new writers, is just to set a reasonable deadline or goal for yourself and then stick to it. Okay, what else have we got here? The Fantasy Grounds has some good automation from Jesternario. Hey, Jester. Let's see. Videos. I just started playing Call of Cthulhu. Do you have any basic tips for new keepers? Love from France. Hello, France. Really, with Call of Cthulhu, the big thing is just enjoy the story. Kind of create a good mood. You don't need to. It's probably best to kind of explain to your players that a lot of what they'll have to do is think about it and role play, versus if they're coming from a background of Dungeons and Dragons or a very action-based game, it can be a bit jarring to go into an investigative style game at first, because they're not going to think about a lot of the options. They're never even going to cross their minds as being options. So that's how the whole Jack the NPC came about, was kind of help kind of work them into how to do an investigation at first. But that's really the only tip. Other than that, just have fun. And a lot of people will debate that this is what those games should be like, or this is what those games should be like. Find what works for you. Have fun with it, and don't worry if it's playing it the right way or not. Mm-hmm. Okay. Have I ever run a Star Trek game? I have not. Let's see. So, I do. Okay. What's your relationship with small indie games? Do you dive into these ever? Powered by the Apocalypse or whatever? Not really. I've played a few of them, but mostly if they just capture my interest or anything. I've heard people mention Powered by the Apocalypse, but I don't know anything about it, so nothing's really jumped out at me. Let's see. Very interesting to see your thought process behind creating a campaign. Will you ever work on it? I've thought about that one. The problem is, a lot of the campaigns that I do, there's no one formula that I can come up with, because sometimes we'll do a theme campaign. So my two most successful campaigns that I've ever run were both themes. The first one was, I told them we're going to be a troupe of wandering performers. So all of your characters, it doesn't matter what class you are, as long as you can be this performer, and you're going to have this little wagon, and you're going to go town to town. So there's like a gnome illusionist who was kind of like the MC of their show, and they had a big fighter who was their strong man, and there was a monk who played guitar. And I was actually played it for months before we had our first bard character even show up, even though they were all musicians, and that worked really well. And then the next campaign theme that I did that was super successful was, we did Cyberpunk, where they were all kids. We started them off at 13 years old, and we played the next several years of their lives. So we ended the campaign when they turned 18, which is normally the starting point for Cyberpunk characters. And so, with that, I can say, it's like, well, you choose a theme and you run with it, but most of the campaigns that I do don't have a theme. So it's kind of like with writing a book or writing any other story, it's kind of hard to say this is the one way to do it, because there's so many different ways that the creative process kind of comes together like that. So the biggest advice I can ever give is one of the same things I said about writing earlier, is don't let the world overshadow the characters. So it's, instead of saying like, I want to make a campaign that is, and then all you talk about is the world, say, what is that the characters are going to do in this world? And if you approach it that way, it's going to be more successful. At least it was for me. If I don't try to make it where everybody comes together for me to show off my world to them, it's like, I made a world, and this is how the characters are going to interact with it, and they could have fun and everything like that. Okay, wow. All of a sudden there's like a surge. I guess some people got off work or something. Bill Jones, $24. Thank you very much, Bill. Trying not to miss any more of the super chats. I felt bad about missing that one guy asking about writing. Matt McLeod. Hi, Matt. Hey, brother, best present coming home from the hospital was seeing you on a Q&A. Man, I'm sorry you were in the hospital, man. Hopefully you are all better now. Much better. I don't have the virus. Well, good. Let's see. You ever tried an RPG in the post-apocalyptic genre, whether it's nuclear apocalyptic, Lovecraftian? Yes. I did do a video once. It was one of my early ones. It's in the first year. You can probably ignore any videos that I did in my first year. They were not that good. Where I did do a Cthulhu setting that is post-apocalyptic. And we've done a couple different kind of homegrown adventures using that as a background. But as far as official settings with the rule book and a world book and everything, not really. I have a copy of the Dystopia Rising RPG, and I've kind of flipped through that. We'll probably play test that at some point in the near future just to see what that one's like and how that plays. I have a few reservations on some of the rules, but we'll see how that one works out. And that's a Zombpoc game, and it's based off of the Dystopia Rising LARP, which a good friend of mine is massively into that LARP. So he's been telling me all about DR for years. And so once the tabletop game came out, he jumped on the Kickstarter, and then through some other weird industry paths, they ended up sending me a copy of it. So I've looked through it, and I'll probably run it in the next couple months. Right now, it's just been, everything's been so weird. I haven't thought about some of these other games that I want to try out as far as really getting the rules down and scheduling a game with everybody. But not too many experiences with post-apoc official games. So, see, ERC 1971, ERC 1971. I had the virus 6 days in the hospital. Jesus, man, I am glad that you were better, sir. That's scary crap. What are my thoughts on using Scott Brown Realty as a multiplanar, multidimensional real estate agency? Go for it. I say go for it. Do Kaspar Backdat. Hi, everybody. It's my first Q&A of Seskorkowski. Well, it's only my third Q&A, and I'm usually just kind of rambling here. What would be the best book to start off, of my books to start off reading? It depends what you want. I have 3 different essential stories or series that I do, and all of them have a different type of appeal. So I've got, Ashes of Onyx, which was the newest one, and this was urban fantasy turns into portal fantasy, pulls in elements of Carcosa and a lot of stuff like that. It is a very, very weird book. And then, hold on. My Valdekin series, Dameron, this is urban fantasy about monster hunters and going out and killing monsters. Kind of international backdrop. It is very action-based urban fantasy. And that series, it's 4 books long. Each book, we actually follow a different protagonist out of the same group of monster hunters. And then after that is the Tales of the Black Raven series, starting with Mountain of Daggers. And these are very pulpy sword and sorcery stories that I pretty much run through pulp cliches like a checklist, and it's not a novel. It's like the first book is like 11 stories, and I think the second book was 9, and then I've got a standalone one that's also out there that's just they're short stories, it's short fiction, and it's meant to be just kind of a callback to the old pulps. So whichever one of those sounds the most appealing to you. I think the most one that most people enjoy is Dameron. That's kind of the most largest demographic of people seem to like that one the best. So probably start with that one. do. Well, it keeps saying that. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, so this thing kind of skipped up on me. Creatures, Caverns, and Crafting. Thank you for $20. You have an awesome channel. Look forward to seeing more of your work. You and your family stay safe. Thank you very much. The channel was initially meant as kind of a little hobby thing. Well, I moved. I stopped my day job and I was just going to write full time, and I ended up making a channel just to kind of like be something else to do, and it has ended up kind of surpassing any of my writing as far as like how much time it takes. But I'm enjoying it. It's been working. It's working pretty well for me. But thank you. AB Coates, £5. Thank you. Do I have enough toilet paper? Thank you for your concern, but I'm good. I'm pretty good. And John Farah, thank you for all your awesome work. Your videos got me back into Call of Cthulhu. Now running Horror on the Orient Express for almost 2 years now. Thank you for the $10. Horror on the Orient Express is one that I desperately want to dive into sometime. The huge campaigns like that are a bit intimidating because you have to think like, well, guys, we're going to commit ourselves for 2 years as an example, and at the same time, it's like, man, there's so many other things I might want to play in the next 2 years. So I'm always intimidated to start those huge campaigns. And it's one that I want to do. For the past few years, the actual Orient Express does like one run, and it's horrifically expensive. But one of my dream vacations is I want to do the Istanbul to Venice run. And it's because that's the run of the Orient Express from both Horror or Murder on the Orient Express and from the James Bond From Russia with Love. So I want to run that one, but then due to political climes, they stopped going to Istanbul. So I will have to wait at some point in the future when that comes back, and I've got that insane amount of money just to throw around. So it'll be a while. And then Sleeples Master. By the way, when I sometimes read these names, my kind of possible mild dyslexia kind of kicks on. Massive thank you for your content and always watch it. For Thor! God, that was such a weird game. It was such a weird direction that we were not expecting. I'm glad everybody else has enjoyed that story because we had a lot of fun laughing about that. Will any of your books ever be translated, hopefully, into German? There was a point where we were in discussions with getting them translated into Italian, and that was when I was with my first publisher, Ragnarok, and then that publisher went under due to a lot of various reasons of mismanagement, and that ended up collapsing because of it. So I've talked to my agent about like, hey, I've got all these novels, see about any foreign rights out there. So it just depends on if there's anyone out there that's willing to bite. So originally there was a short period where they were looking at doing it in Italian, and then it was going to possibly go into Brazil, so Portuguese, and then that didn't happen. So I'd like to sometime. We'll see. Seth, do you have any homebrew settings that you're proud of or you want to publish one day? Well, my Tales from the Black Raven series is set in a world that I did a D&D campaign for many years. In fact, earlier when I was mentioning we did a campaign where it was a bunch of wandering minstrels, that series is set in the same world, even though he never interacts with any of the characters or any of that. They just go through the same world. So I kind of enjoyed that setting enough that I ended up using that for 21 short stories. So 22 if you count Mist of Lichthofen, which is also set in the same world, which, by the way, if you ever have dug far enough down in my catalog of videos, like 2 years before I ever did my first role-playing video, there was one that's called The Mist of Lichthofen, and it was me reading a short story that I sold to Black Static Magazine. They did it for a podcast, so they wanted me to read it. And so I've got a recording of that. I've got crappy equipment, and I'm not a voice actor, so you're going to have to excuse the reading. But It's a free story that's kind of a fantasy horror, and that was a lot of fun. And that's also in the same world as that D&D campaign. What else have we got? Just got book 4 in the Valdican series about 5 minutes ago. Series is very good. Halfway through Hanassier. I'll be honest, man. Hanassier is my favorite of that series. I always find it interesting when I talk to people and they tell me what their favorite in the Valdican series was and kind of their reasoning for it, because sometimes they just gravitate to a different theme or a different character in it. But Hanassier was mine. That was originally supposed to be book 3 when I was envisioning the whole series. It was going to go Dameron, Abinus, Hanassier, because Malcolm, who's the hero of that book, was such a bastard in the first book. He was a conflict character. He is just an arrogant jerk. And then I was going to have it by the 3rd book. You can follow him, and you can see that he's actually a really good guy. And it was a point of view issue that you were looking at before, and all of this. And right after we finished Dameron, after I finished writing it, it's long before we sold it. What the hell? My wife and I went down to New Orleans for a nice extended weekend down there, and I got the ideas for that story, and I wrote just furious notes while I was there. And when I got back, I was still trying to hammer out some of the details on Ibinus, but I kept coming back to Hanassier to the point that it was like, screw it, I'm just going to do this book now. I'm going to move Ibinus to book 3, and I just plowed through writing that book. It is one of the ones that I am the most proud of. And it is so different than book 1, and it is so dark, but I love it. So hope you enjoy it. Let's see, Jonathan Carroll, thank you. Seth Views, Bowbiting Back into RPGs and as a keeper, thank you for your advice you gave me on Twitter. Well, welcome back. It's kind of, sometimes life gets in the way. We end up kind of leaving RPGs for a while. So welcome back, and welcome back to Call of Cthulhu. So no problem. Jimmy Styles, man, it's a fun name. Thoughts on Fate? To do mechanics. I've heard the Fate seems. I have a really good friend of mine, my buddy Matt, who back in 1996 basically pulled my head up to notice that there were games out there outside of D&D, and he basically shoved a cyberpunk book in my hand. And then later on, he handed me a copy of Mongoose Paranoia and led to that. But my friend Matt loves Fate. He is absolutely rabid toward it. So he's told me all about it. He likes it. I don't know. I've never really looked into it. It's part of I'm not going to look into a new gaming system unless I feel that there is something that it can give me that I don't have, or if I feel that if I'm unhappy with what I'm running, if I'm just tired of it, or if little quirks about it have begun to irritate me, and I'm started kind of looking around to see what else is out there. So I'm aware of Fate. I haven't really looked into it. I know that its fans are massive, huge fans of it, but that's about all that I know. Oh wow, there's a lot of 4 Thors going on. This is awesome. Okay, let's see what else we got up here, because evidently I'm missing super chats because I'm so busy just talking about stuff. Have you ever had a character who ate everything because they could? No? Let's see. Oh, hey, Seth, any hints of an art heist scenario? No. I've done a lot of different heist games. I guess a lot of it just depends on where the art is housed. Is it going to be housed in a museum, or is it going to be housed in someone's house or anything like that? Because I've done heists out of castles and giant corporate complexes and big palatial homes. So the only advice I could give you on an art heist is really just determine where it is. And really, actually, here it is. When you're doing a heist game, definitely approach it with the idea of set where it is, kind of set all the little details about it, and then just let it go and see how they handle it, because you are never going to guess how they're going to approach it. All you need to do is just come up with enough little strings out there that they can pull onto, like, oh, we can bribe this guy and get in, or we can get in through a skylight, or we can tunnel under the building and come up underneath. So you just set the location, give some different details about it, and then just let them roll with it, and basically see what they do. Because when it comes to heist games, they will always come at it sideways. So just don't have any expectation of what they're going to do. Just sit back and enjoy the madness of whatever crazy scheme they come up with. Okay. I am sorry if I'm missing any of these little super chat things. Let's see. That's on Fate. No, already did that. You recommend encouraging new players to think like their characters. That's the biggest thing as far as thinking like their characters. That's one of the things that is helpful with alignment in D&D, is I think that it works as a good training wheels to teach people how to do it. A lot of the times, if I have to, I'll just kind of ask, is like, why would your character do that, or is that what your character would do? And if they say yes, it's like, okay, cool. But a lot of times I'll just ask, is that really what they would do? And that's usually enough to get them to think about it. And if they really are all over the place, I might chat with them, but usually not. I'm not as big of a stickler on that, I think, as most people are, or at least most people on the internet make it look like most people really are in real life. But it's mostly just kind of chat with them about their character. We are more, as a player, whenever I do get a chance to play, I am usually more of a tactile player. I start looking at strategies versus being completely the actor variety that's very much in character. But I think alignment is a good way to kind of teach you the basics of kind of the broad scope of, well, how would my character react to it? So that's a good one. But otherwise, just kind of talk to them and kind of coach them through it. But don't tell them what their character would do. Always ask them, is that what your character would do? What was my favorite video to make and why, from Bill Jones? Man, I would say that I was thinking about it earlier today. It was the rubber chicken's foot one was an absolute hoot, because that was such a weird damn video. So I think that was among the most fun to make, because it was just bizarre. And I don't know where that idea came from. Let's see. Is that a huge fan? I found that most tabletop players have played either Cyberpunk or Shadowrun, but rarely both. Is that your experience too? Well, in my experience, between the two, most of them have played Shadowrun, but for me, it was always Cyberpunk. The reason was because I prefer a science fiction setting to my Cyberpunk, rather than blending it with magic and orcs and elves and stuff. So that was just kind of my taste at the time. But my buddy Matt, that I talked about, that introduced me to Cyberpunk, he would play Shadowrun. I mean, he was excited to play anything that was kind of in that genre. But Cyberpunk just kind of personally pulled to both of us. But Shadowrun is definitely, of the two, the most popular. So I think a lot more Cyberpunk players have played Shadowrun than Shadowrun players have played Cyberpunk, just mostly due to the volumes of them. Hey, Seth, I have a really hard time killing characters in Call of Cthulhu. Any tips for getting over this hump as a keeper? No. I actually don't kill that many characters. I talk a big game to them. I don't actually like killing PCs. Now I've got my one player, Jesse, who just loves killing his own PCs through just ridiculousness. But at the same time, we have a couple characters that almost all of my Call of Cthulhu 1920s era scenario reviews, some of the same characters went through them all. So I might be there too. I don't kill them enough. I have killed some, but uh, I would prefer to keep them around. My goal is if I can chip their sanity down enough to where it finally hits that true zero and they go permanently insane. Because once their mythos skill goes above their sanity loss becomes half off. So it actually slows down quite a bit near the end, since their mythos skill has gone up. But I don't do the murder house style to it. In D&D, when we could do resurrections all the time, I had the opposite sin. I killed him too much, but I'd also give him free resurrections like constantly, like tic tacs. But once we got into a game that didn't have instant magic healing or hand wavium resurrection, then I don't really kill them that much. I'd rather those characters stick around for a while and not have to go through the ordeal of bringing in a new one, and a player being disappointed or upset because it's killed, and I'm disappointed because I sometimes have a lot of my own kind of hopes and dreams for a character of like, man, I hope they get up here, this would be really cool. So I don't do the slaughter that I think a lot of other keepers do, or at least a lot of the ones online brag about. So who knows how much they are of the real demographic of players out there. Let's see. Man. We tried a new Alien game for Free League. Man. So I really wanted to get a copy of that when I went to Gen Con this past year. And I think it wasn't available yet. I think there was some sort of delay, but I didn't get it for whatever reason. I think it was availability. That game got me really excited when it was on the Kickstarter. I flipped through a copy of it at a game shop back when the game shops were open, and it looks very pretty. I've heard some very good things about it. But then there was the odd timing issue of around the same time that Alien kind of hit my radar as a game I might be interested in. And I was interested because at that time I just happened to be going through a science fiction mood. That's also when Mongoose reached out to me with Traveler. And then it kind of became like, well, what really can that game give me that this one doesn't? Or, now I've got to learn a totally different rule set to do a lot of the same type of stuff as this game. And then I'm going to get confused because I'm going to get rules crossed between them. So I just haven't picked it up. Though my big thought of is they've got the black pages, like space with like nice kind of text blocks in them. God knows how much ink that eats up, but it looks sharp. I also don't know how well that game would work for longevity, for long running campaigns, since most of Alien is, you discover the alien and you fight the alien and stuff. So I'll have to read it to see how that would work to do like multi-adventure campaigns where it just doesn't feel like you're doing the exact same adventure over and over again. So maybe they pulled it off. A lot of people like it, so I assume they did, but I'll have to read it to see exactly how they approached it. So Eggleg. Hey Seth, love your vids. I was wondering if you go about balancing horror and levity in Call of Cthulhu, a moment of levity. Well, man, my thing is in our games, we spend half our time laughing our butts off. That's also the other thing that I find interesting is we spend so much time as just a bunch of old friends, just, laughing and joking, that the hardest part that I have is being able to do that. Everybody's in a good mood, and then you kind of like grab the hooks and you yank them real close and their guard's down. If I could do a video on that one, I would love to. And it's mostly just improvise it and play it by ear. The problem is sometimes you try to like do that, you grab them and you're all like, and then their face splits open and all this horror happens, and they're still in such a jokey mood that it doesn't capture them. So as much as I like horror games, we spend most of our horror games just laughing our butts off. So sorry. Cyberpunk never got past the Mr. Stud sexual implant you could buy. Well, that was always an interesting one, wasn't it? One thing I was disliked about the Mr. Stud was, it improved your seduction skill by one, which was cool. But then it hurt, due to the loss of humanity. It actually hurt the skill, often by the same amount that it proved. So like it kind of ended up being a wash at the end. So I always kind of found that really goofy about the whole thing. So yeah, I remember the Mr. Stud. There's also the Midnight Lady. Seth, what's your favorite? Soft or hard sci-fi, on fantasy, high or low magic? Love your vids, want more rise to branch like I am. As a fan, I like, I don't know. I enjoy hard sci-fi. There comes a kind of a weird balance with hard sci-fi that it suddenly becomes just a little too dense for me. Now, The Expanse, I absolutely love that book series, which is very much a hard science fiction. But normally, I enjoy just kind of a good little space opera yarn, is most of what I'm doing. Right now, the big book series I've been plowing through is Expeditionary Force, and R.C. Bray read the audiobooks, and he did a fantastic job. And R.C. Bray was my narrator for several of my books. And great guy. And I ended up sending him fan mail. And it's like, hey man, I never send fan mail, let alone to somebody that's my friend. But his performance on Expeditionary Force, which is very space opera, is an incredible amount of fun. So that's a fun book. As far as fantasy, I'm more low magic. I always enjoyed the sword and sorcery style, where usually your hero doesn't have magic, or any magic they have is completely overwhelmed by the obstacles of the magic the obstacle has. So I'm more low fantasy, and then harder sci-fi. I guess it depends on my mood at the time. A good hard sci-fi is just phenomenal, but I find the softer sci-fi is a lot more easy to get into. Let's see, Game On. We're both doing travel at the same time. I know, right? I found it weird when you kind of you become aware of something that you hadn't been aware of before, and all of a sudden you realize how often you see it other places and you just had never noticed. Especially when I became aware of the Traveler game, which I knew a little bit about, other than I had a player that kept telling me we should play it and never explained why. Was once I became aware of that game, I have noticed so many of industry people or other YouTube creators bring up this game as something that they like, and it never clicked with me. I remember one of the ones that the first time it really jumped out at me was at the ENnie Awards last year at Gen Con, and Mark Morrison was doing the presentation for best cover, and he's talking about covers that jumped out to him when he was first getting into gaming. And his was, he said the first one jumped out to him, said, it was just black, and it said, this is Free Trader Beowulf, Mayday, Mayday. And all these people in the audience started nodding their heads. And I'm like, 6 months ago, I had no idea what he was talking about, and everybody in the room knew about this game but me. So it's kind of odd once you start paying attention to certain things that it's suddenly everywhere, and you're doing a Traveler series at the same time I am. That's weird, but I know you didn't do it because I'm doing it, because I think you released yours 5 minutes after mine came out, or before, or I don't know. It was obviously you've been working on it separately, and we just dropped them both on the same day. Let's see. So, Blue Demon, you're playing Alien for the first time, Darrell. Have fun. Hope you. I know it's kind of got a cool sanity system. Some of the guys are telling me about that at TotalCon. That Alien has a really cool way if they're going through kind of shock and the horror of that. And then they said they worked it very well into the mechanics. So I really would like to read it just for that. But have fun. Have I played Tin Candles? No, and a lot of people have recommended it to me. I said I've heard about it, just I never played it. Okay. Think of the videos, books. What do you do about players who just don't open their mouths no matter what I try as a game master to involve them? man, that one is tricky because everybody's differently. I get a lot of questions about how do I handle this particular player, and there's no answer I could give somebody over the internet that I don't know how they should interact with somebody else that I don't know. But let me tell you this. That wasn't it. That was me getting water. But talk to them about, find it if they're happy. A lot of the times, like my most recent player that I brought in is very quiet, and it really stands out because the rest of us are really loud. And so I'm always kind of worried, like, is he enjoying the game? Is he having fun? And then I talk to him. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm having a great time. I'm having a great time." And I'm like, "Well, maybe he's just telling me that." So it's somebody else ask him, and he's like, "Oh no, I'm having a great time. I'm having a great time." So it's like, okay, as long as that player is having fun, then don't worry too much about it. But kind of throw in some different things to make this character interact a little bit. And if they prefer to just kind of stay quiet and kind of let a lot of the other players drive, and that's what they enjoy, let them. But every once in a while, if you do kind of occasionally kind of throw in little lines and plot hooks their way, every once in a while it can be real surprising which ones do it. They will grab onto it, and all of a sudden their play style emerges, and all of a sudden they're like this incredible role player. You're like, holy crap, where the hell was this the whole time? And then once it's over, they might just kind of go back to being quiet most of the time. So just make sure that they're having fun. Try to throw in some lifelines. If they feel like everybody else is talking over them and stuff, that is somewhere you want to talk to some of your other players, because that can be a problem too. I have found if you're talking to other players about possibly steamrolling over the quiet person or anything, instead of walking in and saying like, "Hey, you're screwing up and you're doing this wrong," and Jimmy over there never gets the chance to speak because Jimmy's quiet and shy and you're just an overbearing jerk. Instead of approaching it like that, because that comes off as being harsh and makes you look like a dick, and it makes you a dick, and also makes them immediately defensive, because we become defensive when somebody tells us that we're doing something wrong. Kind of approached it like, "Hey, could you help me out?" They are, they're kind of shy. It's harder to they don't want to like voice up because you're being you and you're being loud and everything. So could you just kind of be aware and help me kind of pull them out of their shell? So with that, you're not really saying that they're doing anything wrong. You're saying, can you help me help this other person? And most players will actually respond very positively to that, versus if you kind of walk in and tell them that they need to tone it down a few notches because so-and-so is not getting a chance to speak. That's one of the best ways to do it. But as far as dealing with the player that's just really quiet, first thing, find out if they're enjoying it. And after that, just kind of throw them some lines, but don't, if they're happy not speaking that much and mostly observing, let them have fun. Have I ever played the End of the World RPG by Fantasy Flight Games? I have not. I'm sorry. I've never heard of that one. Drinkable, the answer to my wind is blowing in the wind. Okay, Skippy the Magnificent, another Expeditionary Force fan. Oh my god, I thought Skippy was so stupid, like when that character first showed up, and now I'm absolutely in love with the character. It is so bizarre. Any interest in doing another miniatures focused video or two? I really got to check a lot of my still unpainted hook horror. I have been considering doing one for the miniatures that I've been picking up for Traveler. I don't think I need to do one for my D&D miniatures. I think everybody has no problem finding D&D miniatures out there. I mean, there's like billions of them, and nobody needs to see how crappy some of my paint jobs are. But I did it for Cyberpunk. I did it for Call of Cthulhu because I was like near sci-fi, and then 1920s. With Traveler, you also have the aspect of specific ships or specific races like Vargr or Hivers and stuff. So I have picked up quite a bit of miniatures for those. In fact, I probably can't see it. I saw a little paint on my thumb because I was painting yesterday. And for whatever reason, a habit that I picked up when I was in middle school and started painting the miniatures for D&D is I always wipe my brush off on my thumb. So you can always tell if I've been going through a huge painting kick because I get this like multicolored, just nasty palette of thumb paint going on. So, but since I've been washing my hands so much, there's only little trace amounts. So I'm probably going to do one over Traveler eventually, but I don't know. Yeah, those are just kind of odd videos to make. They're not as much fun, I guess, as doing ones where I get to slap on a fake mustache and a black and white filter. Um, let's see. I've ever played or been DM for Empire of Netheril. I haven't. I'm sorry. I don't know what that is. Bill Stevens, thank you again. So this is just for your bids overall. I love them. Keep all the NPCs. Dweebles is my favorite. Dweebs is my favorite. I know you have Sally fans, so I'll give an upvote. Well, thank you very much. I the evolution of those characters coming about is so weird. And had I known when I made up a lot of those characters, I would have done them a lot differently. Dweebles has this like, horrible kind of comb over. I have to slick my hair to give me this like kind of swooping hair. And I would not have done that if I had known I was committing myself to the next few years of talking in the dweeble voice and all of that. But and the now fun fact is the horrible shirt that he's wearing, which has kind of a white tribal pattern. That is a shirt that I picked up in like '99 because in a weird moment of weakness, I thought it looked cool. And then by the time I got home, I'm like, oh my God, I'm never going to wear this shirt. And I never did up until I needed to have something kind of bizarre for a character that I was going to do in a video. So I have worn that shirt more as Dweebles than I have ever worn it in the past 20 years that I've owned that shirt. So it's just amazing. I never just threw it away over the occasional closet purges that I've done, but I never did. Let's see. And then I saw another one. Ooh, there would be advice and not being the sip. I don't know what that means. A question. Oh, I just answered that one. 50 millimeter Rafa miniatures for Traveler from the old Citadel. What I've been getting for Traveler is I got a lot of the old Grenadier ones. I ignore any of the human ones. I've got all the cyberpunk miniatures. I don't need more sci-fi humans, but so I got like the alien races, so I could get my Vargers and all of them. And then ships. So I've also been picking up a lot of ships and I've been enjoying painting those. My favorite of the Traveler ships come from 4 Even Shipyards that do it through Shapeways. They 3D print them. And then I can't remember the name of the site. There's another site that does like the little clear acrylic stands that'll put them on. And I stick like little magnets on the bottom of the ship and the top of the stand so they click on. It's kind of gizmo factor, but it's a lot of fun. So those are the 2 big places I go. Also, there were the Rapham full size miniatures, the ones that I just painted as I point out my thumb to signify I have been painting, where I think were the Merchants by Rapham, which they're dressed kind of odd. And I knew none of the players would want to use these miniatures for themselves. So I'm like, well, it's open for me to paint it. Usually miniatures that look like they'd be a good player character, I don't paint them. If it's something like Call of Cthulhu or the games are this kind of a limited number of miniatures that we can use, I'll leave the PC looking ones unpainted. That way when a player says I want to play that one, I can go, okay, cool. Which miniature do you want? And if they grab an unpainted one, it's like, well, what colors are they wearing? I'll paint them a custom miniature. So, but if I look at a miniature and it's clearly no one is going to play this character, that's where I get to like go nuts on it. So that's my formula to explain why most of my miniatures are unpainted. So obviously I'm expecting somebody to play a hook horror one day, and they just still haven't. Let's see. If my characters ever come into conflict with their medic order of the Silver Twilight from Shadow over Yogg-Sothoth? No, they haven't. Shadow over Yogg-Sothoth is one of the games that I do. I really want to look into. And what actually interested me in it recently is Sandy Peterson, I've kind of helped him out with like just playtesting his board games. Like helped him out, like I'm giving him advice. I'm just playing some of his games that he's working on for Peterson Games, and he has one that where you're going through the Order of the Silver Twilight Lodge in it, and he's all like, "Yeah, I got this from the Shower Yagstha," and it's sort of thing. And I thought it was so cool, and I was like, I actually want to look up the Order of the Silver Twilight. They're referenced in a lot of adventures. So yeah, I haven't Rob Walker, ever played Twilight 2000? Yes. I played Twilight 2000 while we were playing in 2001. And it was there's 3 players in the Game Master. And we were having fun with it, and then 9/11 happened. And we just kind of all lost the mood to play Twilight 2000 right after that. And kind of by the time we would have gotten back into the mood, it's so much time had passed that one of the players had actually joined the Army Rangers, and he was already going off to that. So I played it for a short while. We had fun. I think we only had like 5-6 sessions total. So it wasn't like I had a huge background with Twilight 2000. We did play it, and it was a lot of fun. We're driving around our little APC through most of nuked Europe. I hope I do a series on both Conan RPG and Cyberpunk RPG. Don't expect one for Conan. Conan did not impress me enough to warrant the commitment that a full series is going to require. It was a game that my players enjoyed more than I did. I never felt totally comfortable with it, but Cyberpunk, we'll see what's inside Red. I've heard whisperings of different things that's going to be in there, and if it is something that we play and that we jump on and that we commit a lot of time to run, maybe it'll have to be after the Traveler one's done. I'm not going to do 2 of these series back like at the same time again. I did that last year or so, however long ago, when I did a Call of Cthulhu series the same time I did my 2-Headed Serpent campaign diary. And man, that was like crazy how trying to do 2 series at the same time. So for now, I'm only going to do 1. But we'll see how Cyberpunk Red looks. And if we play it and we play it enough, and I think that it's warrant of a series, maybe. Let's see. Have I picked up a new Hellraiser puzzle boxes? I haven't yet. I really want to get the Star one, which is the one that actually like comes up and goes down. And I just haven't gotten around to it yet. So the only thing that I have in my office is, I think I showed this in one of my videos. It's this little aluminum one, which I can't even remember how to open it on camera right now, but it's a little magnetic, open it up, like box. It's kind of cool, but I actually picked that up originally for a game, and then we never ever ran the game I picked it up for. See. So how much I have to pay you to promote my soft sci-fi story till Time of Fate? Yeah, I don't really do paid promotions. I get asked a lot for different paid promotions for my channel, and normally they're for like other stuff like video games or things. And I've kind of got this, like, I don't do fake reviews where I'm like, check out this thing, and it's like an infomercial. So big thing you want to do if you want to get word out on your book is Goodreads and a lot of stuff like that. And also just join a lot of the groups and just kind of self-promo, but be involved in the group. If you just show up as self-promo, nobody pays attention to you. If you become an active member and you chat with people and you answer questions, you talk about stuff, and then you're going to mention that you have some books, that's kind of the big trick on it. But yeah, I don't really plug stuff unless it's just something that I'm personally a huge fan of. So basically I'd have to read the book, and if I really liked it, I'd plug it. How did I handle PC sorcerers back when we played Conan 2D20? We had one sorcerer in our group, and he was a lot of fun. I had to do a solo adventure with him at one point, just because I wanted to really kind of explore sorcery, and it's a little harder to do with a full group where you can have your sorcerer kind of like standing their own against the evil cult, and yeah, it required a lot of alchemy that they had to do. So it was like they had very few spells, and most of what they were doing was like little magic powders that blinded people or caught people on fire. The I do remember one. Anytime he cast a spell, the player got to take a lot of control over describing. What happens is like the sand he's standing and kind of starts swirling and stuff. Because anytime you cast magic in Conan, there should be otherworldly weird effects. It shouldn't just be like you point your finger and a magic missile shoots out. It should be like, and then thunder rolled and, the trees within a few feet of him withered. And then a magic missile shot out of his finger. But I remember one time I had attacked him by bandits, and they had killed his horse. He's lying on the ground. His horse is almost had its head cut off by this guy. And the sorcerer cast like a dismember spell or something, and his roll was just ridiculously good. It was just off the charts. One of those super rare moments where it's just like, oh my god, your dice just were insane. And the description was the horse that's its head's on by a flap starts, its severed head starts screaming as its eyes roll up, and all the sand around him starts like turning red, like it was blood and emitting light. And then he cast a dismember spell and dismembered the bad guy. But it's kind of fun. So the big thing with sorcerers is we just kind of like added a lot of flavor to what their magic looked like. Any chance we'll see more Delta Green reviews from you soon? Just depends if we play any Delta Green. Right now it's like if my review policy is I have to play it in order to review it. So we just have to play some Delta Green. It's just right now we've got so many other games that we're wanting to do. Right now, obviously we're enjoying Traveler. We've been doing a couple side games of Call of Cthulhu, and I'll be dropping some reviews of those adventures pretty soon. And the big thing I'm waiting for is going to be Cthulhu by Gaslight for 7th edition, because I really, really, really want to do Stygian Fox's Hudson and Brand. And when they announced a while ago that Chaosium was going to do the 7th edition for Cthulhu by Gaslight, it's like, I'm going to wait till that's out, and then we're going to play Hudson and Brand. So we'll see. The problem is just the biggest problem that Delta Green has is it's always second or third place to something else I'd rather be playing at that time. Nothing against it. It's just I keep finding other stuff that I kind of move into first place. Let's see. I would like to know the bone saw's alignment, special ability, purpose, etc., etc., etc. I'm like 99% sure the bone saw was chaotic neutral, and I have no recollection of what its purpose was, other than to be the most annoying sword ever. But that wasn't its official purpose. That was my purpose. Let's see. Man, how long are we into this thing? I just saw a counter earlier. We're like an hour or something into it. Hour and a half. Any inspiration for a dark horror psychological campaign? I was recommending watching Peppa Pig and the Wiggles for 1 year all day long. Okay, Newborn was obsessed. I was like, why would you do that, Sleepless Master? My God. But thank you. Wow, that's a weird way of getting your inspiration. For Pulp Cthulhu, do you have any issues with combat? I feel like dual wielding ends up feeling broken, and some of the talents players kill too easily, but that can just be me. We didn't have any problem with it, but we had always played very pulpy games before. I always talk about Cyberpunk 2020, and one of the reasons I always praised its combat style was it had a lot of the pulpy aspects of, you grab two pistols and you jump through the air, and then you karate chop the bad guy in the throat. So when we added the Pulp Cthulhu to the Call of Cthulhu set, it was just kind of like, oh, wow, we've now got what it was we thought we were missing. So we enjoy it. But yeah, it also depends on like how your players and all you employ it, and kind of what you're expecting out of it and what you want. So hope you guys kind of find what your groove is. But for us, man, it worked great. Mhm. Let's see. How about what are your favorite fantasy novels? Okay. Outside of a lot of like the classics that kind of made me kind of into the fantasy fan that I am, so I'd be like Fritz Lieber and a lot of them. Um, I remember the novel that in the past few years that blew me away so bad that I immediately started reading it again, like immediately after I finished it the first time, and that was The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. That book, freaking genius. I love that novel. And so hopefully the fourth book's coming out this year. I know that Scott's had a lot of issues, but the second book, didn't love it. Like I didn't dislike it, but the problem was when you come off like a work that I consider like one of those brilliant novels I've ever read, you can almost never follow that up with something that will meet expectations. So I was a little disappointed when I first did Red Seas over Red Skies, and kind of later on, I'm like, no, it wasn't that bad, but it just wasn't as good. And then I did enjoy the third one, Republic of Thieves. And I enjoyed that one more because it had the flashbacks. But to answer the question, freaking Lies of Locke Lamora. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. My wife didn't like it that much. It like that made me so sad. See, hey, CT Phipps. Hey man, how you doing? By the way, CT Phipps, author, long time friend of mine, cool guy. Will I be doing more cyberpunk reviews coming up soon? It really just depends on what scenarios, if any, we decide to run. I do have a couple that old ones that I'm going to have to update to Red once Red comes out that I've always wanted to do. There were some of like the old Atlas Games scenarios, so they've been out of print now for an age, which it's kind of an odd market to be all like, "Hey, everybody, I'm reviewing a game. It's been out of print for 22 years." But we'll see. My problem was when Cyberpunk was our primary game, and that's all we played. I used almost no modules. There was only a couple that I used, and I reviewed them. So I've got more. I've got a lot more, but most of our stuff was just kind of just playing it by ear. Anything by C.J. Chera or Alliance Union novels are amazing. Saying super compatible for Traveler. I have not. C.J. Chera, Alliance Union. Okay. Let's see. Huge fan. A quick question. What would you recommend for keepers that play modern settings with PCs using cell phones? No reception seems like a repetitive excuse. I love you too. Man, I'll tell you the best cure that I've seen for cell phones, because you're right. If the cell phones never work, that's just like, so you have to figure out a way to work with the fact that you're doing a modern setting and your characters should have access to things like cell phones. There is a wonderful video that you should hunt for sometime, and it was done by Sandy Peterson at Gen Con like 2018, and it was basically like, let's make a Call of Cthulhu scenario, and it's like an hour or so long, where the audience throws out a few plot points, and Sandy goes through his process of creating a Call of Cthulhu scenario, like right there. And he came up with one that's better than most of the ones that I've ever seen. So the guy is amazing. And he addressed cell phones in that one. And his idea is like, okay, so the PCs call 911 to report that there's a thing. It's like, well, why don't you just have your 911 operator be part of the cult? And so now they're on the phone with the 911 operator who's like, okay, so tell me where you are. We're going to send somebody right out to you and stuff. And they're just working against the players as well. Then depending on the horror, you could have it where their cell phone works, but maybe there is some sort of other interference, like they can hear something else going on, or the other person on the other side hears another end of the conversation. So the PC's on the phone, they're screaming like, help me, help me, help me. These horrible things are going on, sir. And then the person's response is clearly that they are responding as if the character had said something else. And that could be kind of a creepy thing, to where the 911 operator they hear another conversation coming out of the player character's mouth. And so you have to come up with a lot of different ways, because you can't always have your 911 operator be a cultist. You can't always have there be no cell reception, and you can't always have their cell phone just starts becoming a weird horror on its own. You just have to figure it out. But a lot of the times, if you have your player characters, call the cops to come out, how long is it going to be before they can get there? It's not like they're going to be able to suddenly teleport and like, boom, we suddenly have police. It could just be like, we'll be there in 20 minutes. And it's like, okay, well, the next 18 minutes, shit's going to get real. And then either the bad guys are gone, or they're going to, like they've taken care of them, or they fled. And now the PCs look like they're calling wolf or anything like that. So kind of come up with a few different ways you can handle it if they do call the police, but don't ever use the same one over and over again, no matter how awesome it was the first time, because that gets tired. Let's see. We are in an hour 40. I'm going to cut this thing off at 2 hours, which, hopefully I will. I never do. Seth, love your work at tabletop roleplays. I'm only on Roll20 currently because of the current quarantine. Yeah, me too. I've ever tried the World of Darkness system. Not enough to say that I've tried World of Darkness. I have played it back in college. I played like 1 or 2 sessions, and we were not really, we were mostly just screwing off and stuff. I've had a lot of friends that love World of Darkness. I always enjoyed the Vampire the Masquerade LARPers. I used to go to a goth club in Dallas in the late 90s called The Church, and they used to have this huge vampire LARP that was going on church nights. So I would often sit on the back porch and watch a lot of the vampire like role playing around me. And it's a packed club, and they've got like 20 role players that are doing their politics, and how they would do combat in the middle of this booming nightclub that was playing a lot of goth and industrial is they would do it through rock, paper, scissors. So if you were quick and you're like kind of on the main floor, you could look over and you see 2 people in black, like everybody else, because it was a goth club, like kind of quietly, in the back, going through so many rounds of rock, paper, scissors to see who just won their duel. So I never played it. I always just enjoyed it being out there. It's just one of those games. It's like, it's not as much my thing as much as I just love knowing that people are doing it, since it always sounded like a cool setting. I always wanted to play a vampire hunter. I think I talked about this in one of my other videos. Like, a lot of people watched Blade and they loved the politics of the vampires. And I looked at Chris Christopherson's Vampire Hunter, and it's like, I want to play that dude, old and grizzled with a leg and a brace. And it's like Whistler was like my favorite. So Dark Bull, for fun, tell your players his character is on the phone, but the reception drops to 3 bars, 2 bars, 1 bar, no bar, and then returns with 1 tentacle, 2 tentacle, 3 tentacles. That works too. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways of doing it. So yeah. People talking about Silent Hill. I never played Silent Hill. I watched the movie once, and I never watched it again. Philip, just $10 because I love your work. Thank you, Philip. You guys don't ever feel obligated you to do it. I'm trying to actually get a good variety of people who are not necessarily paying questions, because I don't want to be that guy that only answers those. Is there a particular Lovecraft entity that you wished was used more often? I'm not a huge tentacle guy, and Shoggoths are like, they're too much. I think Shoggoths are used too many times, especially in the older scenarios. I always love throwing a Shoggoths. To me, they were like the equivalent of a D&D great worm red dragon. It's like, this thing's just about impossible to kill, and it's just destroyer of PCs every round. So, but ones that I always liked, always been a fan of deep ones, but I think those get used enough. Night gaunts. All of night gaunts. They tickle you. It's so weird. I didn't really understand much about them until I was going through the Dream Cycle series by Lovecraft. They did a collection of those. But I always thought night gaunts are kind of weird. They have like no face. Yeah, they're kind of these bat things, but the tickling thing was always just made me laugh. I think that's part of the reason we usually don't have like the scariest games, or mostly just laughing, because I find some of that just so So silly. Doesn't the crunchiness sort of go the opposite and narrative-driven nature of Discworld? Okay, you guys are having your own conversation. I am not familiar enough with Fate nor Discworld to join in on that conversation. What would a party made out of my old D&D characters look like? A lot of spellcasters and thieves. A lot of spellcasters and thieves. Those are the two ones I gravitated to. And at least one witch. One of my favorite character classes from first edition was from Dragon Magazine, October 1986, and it was the witch. And it was meant to be an NPC class, but whatever. It gives all the XP requirements and stuff. We're gonna make this a PC class. And they were more style over substance. They became ridiculously powerful once you got up to like 13th level, but up until then they were incredibly weak, but I always thought they were cool. I think they were pretty much like the original warlocks that you have in 5th edition now. Like they made a pact with some sort of entity, and that's where their magic came from. So you can kind of see a lot of the seeds of that character class now come from the old witch. But so it'd be a lot of thieves, spellcasters, and especially her. Okay, Michael Buchan, is it possible to run a long-running comedy campaign that leans into humor 60% of the time? That's all I do. But that's mostly us being funny. As far as like comedy campaigns where the system is a comedic system, like Paranoia, for example, I'm sure it's possible. I've just never tried it. So, good luck with that. But we normally don't have much difficulty laughing our butts off during a gaming session, but never done any sort of long-term campaign with a comedy system. Let's see. Whoa. No, is Pathfinder, which is a Pathfinder a lot like that. Okay, never read Pathfinder. Have I read Cthulhu Invictus Guide to 7th Edition? Yes, I was on the Kickstarter. I got the book, and I got the GM screen, and then I rewatched the entirety of Rome, and I watched Spartacus, and I watched something else, the Spartacus TV show. And I was really just enjoying watching those again. And I was so excited that we were going to play Cthulhu Invictus, and none of my players were sold on the idea. And I tried talking to about it. I picked up. I haven't had an excuse to bust this out in a video. This horrible toga, like Halloween toga, and Caesar wig for Jack the NPC. So I've got it. I've read through it. I actually started getting some of the stuff ready for one of the scenarios I wanted to like eventually run and review. And none of my players are sold on the idea. They're like, yeah, and Roman Empire really isn't my thing. Let's do Conan instead. So yes, I've read it. Don't expect a review because no one will play it with me. So is the GM's lament. Let's see. I always feel weird kind of reading these. I'd like to have somebody like kind of prep all the questions. You guys are talking amongst yourselves, which is cool. Seth, can you make a stream? No, not my thing. What's my opinion on using miniatures? Mostly the monsters for Call of Cthulhu. I love minis. I'm a minis guy. There is a weird arrogance that you find if you go into like a Call of Cthulhu group and you start talking about miniatures, of people that are all like, you should never use miniatures in Call of Cthulhu. It should strictly be theater of the mind. And then they make a lot of jokes about how it's wargaming and you're busting out tape measures and stuff. And it's like, no, that's not how we do it at all. We use miniatures in every game we play. Not in every scene, just if the scene calls for it, because it helps us visualize where people are and what everything is like. Also, we like the little miniatures that, this is my character and stuff. As far as monsters, some people will say, I don't like the idea of using a miniature for a monster in this game because it should be left to the imagination. And I'm like, look, if the way the miniature looks is going to damage the horror, you just need to describe it better. And most of the time, real horror is not a bug-eyed monster with tentacles or something. That's not scary. What it's doing is scary. So, uh, like, for example, the most grotesque monster in any Call of Cthulhu series ever. It is not a good-looking snare. It's not why I never ran it, but it's one that I have. I love the intro to. It's called the Pale God, and with that one, as the intro, like your PCs meet the guy, and he's going to give him a job, but all of a sudden he kind of starts coughing, it starts groaning, and then he rips open, and like thousands of bloated maggots come pouring out of him. Well, that's grotesque to me, and that is just horrific and just glorious. But pulling out a Shoggoth miniature saying it looks like that, well, that's not how you do it. You pull out a Shoggoth miniature and go, let me tell you what this thing looks like. Is it's protoplasmic, and eyes and mouths come out of it, and then they pop and they sink back down, and there's some of the mouths open up, and then there's a tongue, and then the tongue opens up, and there's a bigger mouth as it kind of melts in, and you really get into the description and say, and it's represented by this little piece of metal. But you put the image of what it looks like in their head. The piece of metal or plastic or whatever it's on the board is merely meant to represent where it is, but the actual description of what it looks like, you should always be able to provide, even if they can look at that to kind of give them a rough idea of its shape. But you give the horror. You tell them why this is scary, and what does it smell like, and how is it moving, and what is it doing. And so I don't think a miniature takes away from any of that. I think if nothing else, that miniature helps you either visualize it or know where it is for spatialness. So I love them. I love minis in Call of Cthulhu. Let's be honest, how many good horror movies are ruined by a dude in a poorly made suit? This is true. This is true. But in all of even my best painted miniature does not look as good as a dude in a poorly made rubber suit. So we're at an hour 51. I'm still cutting this thing off at 2 hours. So do I plan on reviewing more Delta Green? I already said I'm going to have to run more Delta Green. Have our investigators ever met the man in many faces, Nyarlathotep? Our characters in our Call of Cthulhu game that we've been doing for a while, which we were supposed to get back in March, and things went sideways. They have met Nyarlathotep technically twice. One of them I don't count because that was it wasn't a good Nyarlathotep incarnation, but they did in the the Dagger of Thoth, and that's actually where you meet him, and he chats with you in this kind of underground temple. So they met him. So one of our characters, who's this just epically wonderful character, she kind of has a checklist of mythos entities that she has gotten to interact with, and Nyarlathotep is a big check mark of like, yep, met that guy, and then we stabbed him. Why do I prefer skill-based versus assigned class ability games? That's from Darth Joel. I just do. Classes feel weird to me once I started using skill-based. One of the big jokes we used to make about it was, D&D, in the older editions, when you had the non-weapon proficiencies, and it's like, when you get 5th level, you get a new non-weapon proficiency, and I'm going to choose an instrument. But how you get 5th level is you do it by killing monsters. So the joke was always like, I killed the Goblin King, and now I can play the mandolin. I always found that weird, the rise in hit points to where certain threats no longer threaten you because you've just got so many hit points. That kind of bothered me. Or a player comes up with a really cool character concept, and then your job is to kind of shoehorn in like, well, I guess that kind of falls into this class because what you're wanting doesn't fall cleanly into the classes. So we're going to make them this class. Maybe we'll do a dual class just so to kind of make it work, but it's not really the character that was envisioned. Well, a skill-based game does away with all that. You just, there's no class. So you say, well, I have a character who does this. Okay, we'll do your skills that way. And for most of them, there really isn't any XP climb. So if a kid jumps out with a switchblade and says, give me all your money, it doesn't matter how experienced you are, that is still a threat to your life because you don't have 97 hit points, and that only does 4 points at maximum. So I enjoy those aspects more in a skill-based game. Now, the big flip back to it, and I want to do a video on this eventually, uh, class-based games do give that wonderful buzz of I got a new level, and that's kind of addictive. It's like I'm 5th level, and I got all this stuff now, and all these abilities, and cool. That's awesome. But I still prefer a skill-based game. I think overall that gives us a lot more freedom. When we made the big leap to skill-based for a few years, and we did the interlock system across fantasy, 1920s pulp, and of course cyberpunk. And then 5th edition D&D came out. We picked up 5e and we played that for a year. All of my players talked about it felt really weird and limiting all of a sudden to be playing a class versus having different skills going up individually and as they use them, or being able to pick up new skills just on a whim. And also the XP climb. They all said this felt weird, and it felt weird to me. So then we jumped back into skill-based games and haven't looked back. So that's why. But, if you prefer class-based, have fun. I had class-based as my primary type of game for most of my gaming life. Video. I would say, see a stream my GM style. No, my players and I talked about streaming games, and it was pretty much unanimous that game days are our days. So we're never going to stream it because those are our days as a lot of old friends to sit around and chat and be ourselves and not have anybody looking over our shoulders and listening in. So those are our days. Now, if you ever want to hear me play the How We Roll podcast, I am in the Massive Nyarlathotep game they're doing. We should be hopefully playing the last session next week. We were supposed to play it last weekend, but as one of the players said, is feeling a little under the weather and should have recovered by now, hopefully. And then we'll finally get to that last episode. We have been playing that game for like a year just because we always have so many issues when we're trying to schedule sessions. Okay. A question. Okay, so here's a question. Would Pulp Cthulhu or Call of Cthulhu work for a game with no monsters or horror elements, like, say, a detective game or an action-packed gangster game? If it's an action-packed gangster game, I'd probably go with Pulp Cthulhu. And yes, I think it would. Call of Cthulhu is based off of I can't remember the name of it. It's the general role-playing system, basic role-playing system, BRP. So it works. The BRP is what they use for RuneQuest. So you could just take that aspect of Call of Cthulhu, which means you're no sanity loss and no monsters and magic, and do that as 1920s or whatever else you want. It's just a great platform that can work with just about anything. Cats or dogs? Well, cats or dogs. I'm a cat guy. I have two. I have a little gray one named Cleo, which is short for Cleopatra. And then she showed up in my outtakes when I did for 50,000 subscribers. And then we have we think he is a Ragdoll Maine Coon mix. Not really sure. His name is Titus. He's enormous and just monumentally stupid, and but soft and lovable. But there are two little cats. And let's see, we got 3 minutes left. So Beavis or Butthead? Butthead. I've ever played Cypher or Blades in the Dark. I have not. I've had a lot of people mention Blades in the Dark, and I knew nothing about it because all they tell me is you should play it, and like that was the end of their sales pitch. But when I was at TotalCon, I ended up like sitting on a couch with a dude talking about different games, and he brought up Blades in the Dark, and I had no idea what the world was like, and that's actually where it started kind of interesting me. My God, my words are not working. But I started getting interested in it, so I would like to look into it sometime, but haven't played it. So, ever played a fantasy game using Magic World? No. Thank you for $5, but no, never played it. We got a minute and a half. Recently watched your Traveler episode now to get my 15-year-old to watch Firefly. 15 hasn't watched Firefly yet. Shame. Let's see. Which system would you love to run, but either know your players won't like or know the theme to fit your group? Well, I'd love to try out the Cthulhu Invictus, which I knew they would get into. Most of the time, my players figured out a long time ago, I believe, that if I get excited about a game, that they'll usually trust me and run with it, and that's how I was able to talk them into going to Call of Cthulhu in the first place. But that's really the only one. Okay, we're gonna do this. Ever played Monster of the Week? Like, is that a game or Monster of the Week type of games? Because there's a lot of Monster of the Week type of games. So, what time is where everybody lives? I don't know. Live your videos. Stay safe. When are we getting a Jack the NPC Q&A? I have thought about this. What I need to do is I need to fidget with this enough to make it black and white, because I could do it. I could sit here in a suit and I could have my little hat and my little flask, and I could talk like this the whole time. But if it's in color, is it really Jack the NPC if he's in full color? He needs to either be black and white or sepia. Otherwise, it's just me dressed up and talking stupid. That's the magic of Jack, is the coloring. That's it. That's the secret formula. Okay, let's see. Let's go ahead. Have I played RuneQuest? I have not. I picked up the quick start for RuneQuest, and I flipped through it. It just didn't really jump out at me. Part of what it is, recently, most classic fantasy has not really appealed to me that much. We had a run of it when we did Conan, and I'd lose interest with kind of classical fantasy type games right now. I am more into the modern-ish, meaning basically pistols are a thing, up to sci-fi, and that's where it really keeps me. I think it's just I played so many fantasy games for so many years that after a while I just kind of meh towards it. So I would heard a lot of great things about RuneQuest. I'm sure it's a great game. Just a lot of the fantasy just didn't really yank me into it the way, because it'd be like I'd read that and it'd be like, oh, that looks kind of neat, and then literally anything else showed up that was more of a modern setting, I'd be like, oh, but we could do that instead. So that's kind of the story with that. Last one. Choose one. Okay, and that's not a good one to be end with. I'm going to answer it. So Ninja Fresh. Oh God, what's your take on westerns and RPGs? Do you like the setting? So there's the Call of Cthulhu Western setting that they just recently did, I guess, past 2-3 years ago. I played that for the very first time back in February. It was a lot of fun because it's Pulp Cthulhu in the West. But I'm a Texas boy, and I'm a bad Texas boy in the fact that Western stuff has never really been my thing. So if I did it, I'd have to buy like cowboy outfits for Jack, and man, that's intimidating. But I'm more of like, at the same time, I'd rather do the Cthulhu by Gaslight and do some Jack the Ripper era type of stuff. So I said I enjoyed the Wild West game we did, but it's never been something that I've been like, let's go out and play Wild West, because not my jam. Okay, and see, would I consider a viewer contribution for a war story? Nah, because I wouldn't be able to tell the story from that. I was there and get to like talk about it and embellish the right parts. But I've also probably the problem is finding a good war story I could make a video out of. I got a ton of war stories. I might have to do one where it's literally rapid fire, because most of them I could like do in like 45 seconds. I can't upload a video about a story that was like, and then he said something really funny, and that's the end of it. So I might have to do like some collection of them. Josh, thank you for all your videos. Love your traveler character creation video. It was useful for my first traveler character. That is good to hear. That video was a beast to make. During the part where I'm obviously voicing it over, because my voice changes because I was using a different microphone, I was 290 image slides. Like, I have so many hours of the work in that video, and hopefully people found it useful. I ended up having fun with it when I could cut back to the players and stuff, but a lot of those very technical, and they're not too much fun to make when they get into the technical details. There's Q&A. Red Dead Redemption. I don't play too many video games. I used to play a lot of them, but now I just don't play them as much anymore. What's the jankiest system you've enjoyed playing? What's the most polished system you've disliked running? Well, jankiest system. Our hybrid of first/second edition D&D that we played for years is probably the jankiest. I didn't know that at the time. That was all I knew, and we thought it was the greatest game ever. And we had tons of fun and tons of memories I wouldn't trade for anything. But when I do go back and look at a lot of the first edition stuff, and then some of our weird house rules we threw onto it, it was like, wow, this is goofy. As far as polished systems that I didn't really like that much, I can't really think of any off the top of my head. I could criticize just about any system out there, not in a good criticism way. And I can find something really goofy about it that I dislike. The only one that I don't think I can really say too much about as far as any negative about the system is Call of Cthulhu. I think 7th edition is just smooth and wonderful. Some of the sanity, I think Delta Green got a little bit better on how they handle sanity, but as far as a game mechanic system, I think 7th edition's like as smooth as it gets. But I said it was going to end at 2 hours. We're at 2 hours, 5 minutes, and 50-something seconds. Okay, do I prefer when the rules are more mechanical and have grounded rules, or when it's free form and more abstract in a system, things are given expressed mechanical values? I prefer. Okay, this is one of those things where I prefer more mechanics, but it is a magic point to I like a lot of stuff explained in the rules, but I don't want everything explained in the rules, because if it gets too bogged down in the rules, that's where it stops becoming fun. And I have played games where we got like really, really into like minutia details, and the rules should be able to cover every single thing. And that sounds really cool when you're sitting around a table having a drink with your buddy talking about a role-playing game to get into those aspects. But when you're actually playing a game, that crap gets tiring fast. So I do like a lot more crunch to my games. I don't like pure free-form games. Those just feel weird to me, and I don't enjoy it as much. So I do like some solid mechanics, but at the same time, I want my mechanics to cover a lot of options with basics, but not cover all the little minor details, because as cool as a lot of them sound in theory, in practice, they're not as much fun as they are when you're sitting around telling your buddy about them, of like, oh, it's great, when you get shot, you roll on this chart to see exactly which organs it perforates. Isn't that so realistic? And you're like, oh, it's great. And you play the game, it's like, holy God, we got to go through these 90 charts. Let's just see how much damage it is and move on. So I like crunch, just there is a cap to it. And I can't tell you exactly where that cap is, but there's a point where it just stops working for me. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to cut this thing off since we've been doing this for quite a while. And everybody stay safe and have fun. And just, hopefully we're going to return to normal soon. But in the meantime, thanks for chatting up. I figured it'd be kind of a fun thing to do. I wanted to do it earlier this time because normally I do them too late in the day that any of the viewers in the UK, it's like 3 a.m. And I think right now we started at like 10 o'clock at night. So it's probably still too late for them. But anyways, everybody have a great day. I'll catch you next time.